Oh, what is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Talk of the Tundra, your Green Bay Packers podcast that is a proud partner of the Eurostep Podcast Network and the Blue Wire family. As always, I am your host, Numac, coming to you on Jordan's favorite day of the year, which is NFL Tampering Monday. A lot of deals coming out as if they were certain, knowing that they can't actually sign them till Wednesday. So, love that we do this whole song and dance for this period. And obviously, Jeremy talking about these new Packers additions and a departure of sorts so far is, is my lovely co-host Jordan Tresky. Jordan, how you doing, buddy?
Doing well. Free agency is here illegally.
Illegally, that's very
Is it
very
when
true.
is the illegal tampering period begin?
I think it.
Every other day.
When is the legal tampering or the illegal tampering?
I said illegal
Yeah, the
tampering.
legal tampering is already happens, but
I
the free agency signings happen on Wednesday. If that's what you were asking, like Wednesday at
yeah,
like noon or 3 o'clock or
probably
something. I
noon.
forget,
Yeah, some
whichever it is. But
arbitrary.
uh, yeah, it started today. A lot of movement around the league. For all of that, be sure to check out GSPN After Dark. We're doing a full NFL free agency recap over on the premium Substack for $8 a month. You can support us as we continue to make all this great content for all the sports in Wisconsin and uh, broader sports, obviously, and some fun things in there too. But all that being said, we're here to talk about Packers. Packers' first signing of the day came 4-ish hours after it opened up, and everyone was kind of like, okay, nothing's really happening. Packers missed out on a few free agents that they were hoping to fans were hoping they'd sign, and their first signee ends up being former 49ers offensive lineman guard Aaron Banks to a 4-year, $77 million contract. Uh, the numbers that I saw for the guaranteed money were it was none of it was guaranteed except his signing bonus. So that's obviously all just sources and such, but 4 years, $77 million, and I believe around 60 million of it was in the first 3 years of the deal. Um, Banks is a 4-year veteran with the Niners, and he was selected 48th overall in the 2021 draft. A handful of picks are before Josh Myers was in that draft. He's exclusively played at left guard since becoming a starter in 2022. Obviously playing next to Trent Williams out there in San Francisco. For how this plays out, obviously left guard is currently occupied by Elton Jenkins, and with the departure of Josh Myers, questions are being uh, risen about who moves inside to center. So, I guess Jordan, what are your thoughts on the move itself, and who do you think's end up playing center?
Well, I had to find out about this after the fact, that I was kind of ecstatic. Not ecstatic, that's not the right word. I was kind of bewildered. And then I realized, well, that is Packers free agency or draft in a nutshell. Like, you get expectations of where they're going to go, and they kind of do a little swerve on you.
Yep.
In this case, I mean, you look at the price tag, 4 years, 77 million dollars. Who knows how that's structured or what's guaranteed? Because that's obviously the big, as we'll get into with the other signing that the Packers did on day one. That'll be the bellwether of like how long could this person realistically be on the Packers roster. Um, I, look, we knew that there was going to be some target on the offensive line. A lot of us probably looked at Josh Myers leaving as a legitimate possibility, and the Packers certainly had internal options to replace him as center. We're kind of seeing that come to fruition with Ellen Jenkins rumored to be taking over. Obviously, Zach Tom is versatile too, so that was maybe an option that they turned to in some shape or form. But it could have easily been where the Packers look at other interior offensive linemen or centers, and they could have just done a like for like swap. I think it's very interesting for it to be at left guard and Ellen Jenkins moving, because there's a lot of like ripple effects of what this means. Because it obviously opens some competition for Rasheed Walker at left tackle, Sean Ryan at right guard. A lot of analysis or reporting from Packers beat reporters, specifically like ESPN's Rob Davante, has looked at this as where do they, want to put Jordan Morgan, who, you selected first row or in the first round last year, didn't play much outside of when he was healthy. And when he wasn't healthy, he wasn't available, obviously. Um, so I think it's very interesting that they went this route. It gives them optionality. Is it an overpay? Probably. Like I think this is kind of what, not to be like we said this, but it was like the expectations going into this free agency were far different than where it was last year. I would not have put money on offensive linemen going off the board first for the Packers free agency moves,
No,
but
sir.
I think that's where a lot of things will be judged about it. But they see something in Aaron Banks that they feel like is fortifying the inside of their offensive line. And I think Aaron Nagler pointed out pretty quickly from the outset of this news coming in. Last time we saw the Packers offensive line in action, they got decimated by,
Elton
the
Jenkins
best
injury.
defensive,
Yeah.
yeah, by his injury and then the best defensive line in football.
Yep.
So, yeah, there was definitely some room for beefing up literally with some big men
Yeah.
to protect Jordan Love.
Would agree with that part, but like the devil's advocate part of me in that also thinks like in a similar fashion, this is kind of a poor analogy, so you guys can break me over the coals with it if you need to. But you don't build parking lots and highways for your max amount of driving like times, right? Like you don't build.
Tell that to Rick Schlesinger.
I understand that, but you don't build huge parking lots and 20-lane highways to get through traffic faster because of that. They're not going to be
Yeah.
going against that Eagles front anymore ever because they lost, I think, at least three of them, two of them for sure already, but in Milton Williams and uh, Josh Sweat, and then I think there's another one on who's a free agent as well, but I forget. But regardless, they go down like EJ goes down, and they have to put in their second and third string guards because that was who was there with Jordan Morgan out. And
Yep.
now you take out Josh Myers, replace him with Aaron Banks, and probably give Jordan Morgan all the opportunities to either take the left tackle spot or the right guard spot. Move EJ to center, which is what Tom Silverstein was reporting this afternoon, is that the plan is to put EJ at center. And so at that point, if Sean Ryan's your sixth offensive lineman, that's pretty good. Like that's a good spot to be in if Jordan Morgan can make that jump. If he doesn't make that jump this year, that's starting to be a bit worrisome just for his caliber as an offensive lineman and if he'll be able to compete. But if it works out where you go Rasheed Walker at left tackle, Banks, EJ, Morgan, Tom, that's a good place to be if Jordan Morgan can prove that he can hang with the rest of the five. But they've always wanted to have their best five linemen out there, and I don't know what this means for Aaron Banks. He's a big dude, 6'5", 325. He's instantly the heaviest player they have on their line. The I won't sit here and try and act like I know how good Aaron Banks is as a guard. His PFF grades are, I'd say, just okay,
Mediocre.
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 Yes, yeah, he was like he's
I think if that was someone on the Packers, we'd be
looking to
like
move
compared
on.
to Josh Myers
Yep, be
or
looking to move
compared
on.
to, yes, perfect.
He's got like
Perfect.
some good run blocking games this season. Over the course of his career, since in his 3 years of having starting snaps, he's only allowed 2 sacks. But I think part of that also is you're playing on the same side as Trent Williams, a future Hall of Fame left tackle.
Good point right there. Yep.
So, like, he's allowed 22, 17, and 20 hurries, 25, 23, 25 pressures, but then only like 2 sacks. So, I mean I can see a reality in which this ends up being a good signing for the Packers. Like this is any offensive lineman you give money to like this is definitely like a wait and see kind of thing. Um,
Yeah.
and so he's still young. He's 27 and a half, so he'll be around for the like the this quote unquote prime of his age career kind of thing. And so it's not to say that it's a bad signing. I think it's just like you said, very surprising that given the needs of this team that guard was the first one to go because not only did they not sign a center, they signed a guard where they already have three guys who can play it between Morgan, Ryan, and EJ. Like if they signed
Yeah.
a center, I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. They're filling the hole that Josh Myers is vacating. But I think clearly the Packers and Brian Gutekunst believe that EJ can still play center despite what we saw in that very rainy game against the Lions. And so it may end up being they might just be thrown around to see who can play there. Like they might throw EJ there in camp and they might throw Jordan Morgan there in camp or Sean Ryan or whoever can play the spot to give them their best five on the line. Like I don't think Tom is moving inside. I think that's a set right.
No.
That's a set spot for him. And so it's just interesting to see how they continue to build out their line because like I'll give the Packers the benefit of the doubt. They're pretty darn good at building and developing defense or offensive linemen. So if they believe they can get the most out of Aaron Banks, I'm gonna take their word for it right now. It just is like I said, it's interesting to see them continue this pattern of we want positionless offensive linemen.
Well, I think that, and there are two things that are interesting. It's the Jordan Morgan domino effect. You kind of talked about it. It's like they're opening up room for him. Yeah, I mean, like they want him to be on that starting five. Someone, ideally, if Jordan Morgan is making that leap, is going to have to not see as many snaps as they saw last year.
Right. I think like Sean Ryan is that guy. But like to your point of like they want to see him on that line.
But
I think they want to see him on that line because they spent the first round pick on him. Like they're going to be shoehorning
well,
it.
and that's the thing.
He's going
It's
to be
now
shoehorned in to get reps because he is the first round pick.
you spent a first round pick on Jordan Morgan last year. You're paying Aaron Banks. Again, what the structure looks like of this deal is very it's compared to Nate Hobbs' deal, the guarantees have not been officially reported
Right.
as of right now.
Yeah.
So
Then like I
that
said,
is
what I
kind of
saw.
telling,
Yeah. Like what I saw earlier was that his only guaranteed money is his signing bonus.
which would make sense and kind of is their MO.
Yeah.
I
It's
mean,
a
that's
it's
what
a very
Josh
Packers deal.
Myers or Josh Jacobs did last year.
Right. And so it's entirely like a prove it deal. If he's really good for them, he'll keep earning his money kind of thing.
Yeah.
But if he's not good, then it gives them the benefit of cutting weight whenever they want.
One, I think the biggest thing too is that so as you mentioned, Jordan Morgan was selected first in the first round last year. You pay top dollar for, at that point was the uh whatever you want to call it, best or most available guard in free agency after all the movement before, and you're paying good money in some shape or form. Rasheed Walker is going to be a free agent next year. Zach Tom is lining up an extension, almost certainly.
Yeah,
Sean Ryan, I think, is a free agent next year as
I think
well.
he is.
So it's definitely some prevent defense in some way of knowing that two of your offensive linemen to start at the end of last year are going to hit free agency if you don't commit to them, and then you have your first round pick rate waiting in the wings. So
Yep.
this kind of churn is still happening, but they like, instead of it being Andre Dillard being kind of like the sixth man. I guess Morgan was too, but it's his health.
Morgan was the sixth man until he hurt his shoulder.
Yeah, which was
Yeah,
early in the year.
yeah.
It's more of like now you have kind of that option behind there. And frankly, too, the guards that they had behind Elton Jenkins were rookies, didn't play much. You
Well,
know,
neither of them played until the playoff game. Kadeem Telfort and Jacob, I forget his last name.
Jacob Monk, Travis Gelfer, or
No, it was
Glover.
Travis Glover and Kadeem Telford, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because Monk is the center. But regardless, yeah, I mean it's just interesting, is what I keep coming back to. Um, and I think somebody had mentioned on Twitter that it could lead them to relying more on the run game too. Like he's a big dude, so he can
Yep.
he can push some guys around. Has decent enough run blocking grades. Again, grades take a big grain of salt from PFF, but better run blocking grades than he did pass blocking, and it helps when again you're next to Trent Williams and Christian McCaffrey is your running back. Like those are good things.
And Kyle
So
Shanahan is your
yep,
play caller, all that stuff.
right. So I think for Aaron Banks, it's definitely a we'll wait and see how this turns out, and ultimately they had money to spend. I think to your point that Rasheed Walker and Zach Town will be free agents next year. I think what
And Ryan.
and Ryan, I think what's interesting about all of that is, say for example, they all look really good. So let's say all the offensive line will look really good. Banks looks good during camp. So does EJ at center. So does Morgan Morgan just in general. Tom continues. Walker continues, etc. There's a trade market for Rasheed Walker because they are not going to pay Rasheed Walker the money that he's going to earn himself if he keeps playing like he does. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying let like trade Rasheed Walker for nothing, but teams that need left tackles, like the Texans, just trade away Larry Tunzel. Like they need a
For a
left.
haul.
I wouldn't call it a haul. A,
It's a lot of picks at least.
it was a second, a third, and a fourth, I think. Oh, but only a second, and a third because they sent the fourth too. It wasn't a lot for
It wasn't a lot, but that offensive line was also a, a tire
sure.
fire for Houston.
Larry Tunzel is a different conversation, but regardless, they still need a
Yes.
left tackle because the biggest problem with CJ Stroud last year is that he was running around too much. So maybe they want Rasheed Walker on their team if they can't find anything throughout this offseason and come training camp. Like we need a left tackle. If you can get a second for left tackle and the entire line looks good, I wouldn't see why you would just throw Jordan Morgan out at left tackle and then Ryan back at right guard, and then that's your line. You don't have the sixth guy that you want, but if you continue to develop the guys that are on the team already, that could be an option. And so it'll be interesting to see how the line sort of shakes out the rest of the offseason. If it does just stay what it is, if they take any in the draft, I'm sure they will. They always address the line somehow. They only have 7 picks this year. If they don't get anything for Jair, what's today? Monday on Wednesday. So it's I'm just the line is something I'm just curious about as we continue and just begin this offseason.
I agree.
So alrighty, next up, let's talk about the Packers' other addition they had today, cornerback Nate Hobbs, coming from the Las Vegas Raiders, signing a deal with the Packers, a 4-year, $48 million contract. This was first reported by Tom Pelissero, and he reports that $16 million is guaranteed for Hobbs. Uh, like I mentioned, he had spent, or not mentioned, he had 4 years with the Raiders after being a fifth round pick in the 2021 draft. Um, Continuing the line of Vegas people to Green Bay with Rich Bisaccia, Keyshawn Nixon, and Josh Jacobs. Um, in 51 NFL career games, he has 3 interceptions, 3 forced fumbles, and 3 sacks. Uh, Last year with the Raiders, he played 304 snaps in the slot and 116 snaps in the box. 2 years ago, I believe it was, um, in 2021, or 2022, my apologies, um, was the year that he was more an outside corner. Yeah, so comparatively to his last 2 years in Vegas, he had 304 snaps in the slot and 500 in the slot in 2023. In 2022, he had 500 snaps on the dot at outside corner, which is where the Packers needed help with Jair most likely not coming back, Eric Stokes departing, and the Packers really only having Carrington Valentine and Keyshawn Nixon out there right now. I guess the question I have for the Packers just in general, um, is how they weave together the secondary to be a cohesive unit. Um, Ryan Wood of the Press Gazette reported that the Packers' intent is to have Hobbs move from the slot to the corner or to the outside, which will bounce Keyshawn back to the full time slot corner, which I think is interesting because yes, Keyshawn was primarily a slot corner for this team when Jair was healthy, when Eric Stokes was healthy, when they're at full strength. But I think we saw that Keyshawn can play outside well enough, right? And so if you move if you move Hobbs outside, your other starting corner outside is Carrington Valentine. Keyshawn back in at slot makes that corner room crowded right there. You want to have depth. Obviously, it's not crowded, but those are your set guys, right? But then you have Xavier McKinney at safety, Evan Williams at safety, and then where does that leave Javon Bullard? Because they spent a second round pick on him last year. He showed that he was kind of in his element more as a slot receiver. Just in what we saw of him last year, obviously he had some injury concerns, didn't play the whole season, but this signing kind of just leaves Javon Bullard out in the cold, and I'm not really sure how they're gonna weave that room together because you still need to let Javon develop. He's a second year guy and he's a second round pick. Like they need to let him play to see what they have in him. And I wonder how that's going to shake out. Like unless things don't go well with Carrington Valentine and he doesn't continue, then they put Keyshawn back outside, then move Bullard back inside the slot corner. I don't really know. And I think that's kind of the weird understanding of this signing. I think he's a good player. I'll get to that in a second. I just at the moment don't really understand the idea behind the signing.
I would, not to be devil's advocate, I would say the fluidity is kind of the appealing part of this, is that you have someone that his main pedigree, at least in terms of like where he was lined up, is playing the slot. So if you are attempting to move him outside, or at least have the versatility where things are interchangeable. If Nixon and Hobbs are kind of bouncing around, Carrington Valentine, who is opposite of that, is mostly an outside cover corner. And you're trying to fit in snaps depending on size, depending on defenders, depending on scheme changes that will, maybe Jeff Halfley wants to build on the blueprint that he built last year. I think one, we knew that they just needed numbers. They needed reinforcements. You got a guy that, compared to where the cornerback market was trending, 60 million guaranteed is not a lot for 4 years, 48 million. It's a way to see how this looks. It's not, for as much as like we looked at, like, I know a lot of Packers fans are looking at like Paulson Adebo, who went to New York.
Yep.
Byron Murphy was kind of the top line cornerback. He just re-signed with the Vikings as we were recording.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Um, 3 years, 66 million, whatever guarantees. I'm forgetting right now.
It's what they wanted to do, and they didn't want to sign Darnold, which, to their credit, go for it.
Yeah. Um, I think it's not a top line name. It's not a top line cornerback that was available, but it fits with the mold that they're clearly trying to build with fluidity, versatility, guys that can cover multiple positions, multiple zones, multiple schemes. I think that is where I'm kind of identifying with it, even with Hobbs not being like a top line, name, or, I know health has not been, or durability over the 17 game season, plus playoffs. Hopefully, it hasn't been high up for him because he got hurt last year. I kind of, I see it more. I'm more bullish on it, but I think to your point, it does, like, what does it mean for someone like Javon Bullard, who I wasn't as high on his rookie year as a lot of other people were, because I think one, it was just a depth issue. But I think having some competition, having guys that can do multiple or play multiple roles at a given time, at a given series, maybe, I think just helps the overall picture of with the secondary where, as we knew, they just needed more numbers.
Right. And he gives them that for sure. Like it's depth. We said it the entire time they needed depth, which is again, which is fine. And I'm excited about the player in general.
Yeah.
His availability is just okay. Um, he hasn't played a full season ever. He played 16 games his rookie year, which his rookie. He probably didn't play in one game because he's a rookie kind of thing. Um, but he started 9 of those games in 2021. Then he played 11, 13, and 11. So like, if we're gonna sign a guy, I'd rather be a little more available than Nate Hobbs has been. But enough with like the pessimism. I just going through some of the clips that people were sharing on social media today. Looks like he can play. He, honest to goodness, talking about like the fluidity of the room. He reminds me of a lot of what Keyshawn Nixon already does. He's really good at
I don't think that's an accident either.
no,
I really think that they have for I know Patrick Graham was is I don't think he's the defensive coordinator still there,
I don't know. I
but I
can look.
believe wasn't Patrick Graham a Packers.
The defensive oh no,
Ah.
the defensive coordinator there now is yes Patrick Graham. It was
Oh, it
Gus.
is.
It was Gus Bradley his first year when he played outside corner.
Yes, Patrick Graham was also the Packers linebackers coach and run game coordinator in 2018, otherwise known as Mike McCarthy's last year in Green Bay.
He was there.
Either
He
way,
was there
I
for
just feel
one
like
year.
maybe it's just the name association. I
Yeah.
just feel for some reason, and maybe it's probably more so Rich Bisaccia, but the fact that they have really, there's something there that the Packers have liked about individual players within the Raiders program. And maybe that is because the Raiders' old adage of drafting guys is like draft the most athletic, fastest guy available. And you look at Hobbs' RAS score, it's like 9.62,
Yeah.
whatever it is.
Part of it too is this was shared by 97.3 The Game in Milwaukee, the radio station here in Milwaukee. Um, and this I'm just gonna read the tweet since I don't want to paraphrase it. This is new Packers cornerback Nate Hobbs raved about his connection with Rich Bisaccia on Max Crosby's podcast last year. And then it goes into quote, I shed a tear when I found out he was leaving because that was the first man other than my uncle that I had a father-son bond with in some way. He was like a male role model in my life that I didn't have for a long time. So this is Pete Bukowski I think made this point, or no, this was my point, not Pete. It was She Said TV. So Aaron or whoever over there made this tweet, which I think is a good point. Say what you want about Rich Bisaccia, the special teams coordinator. It seems like every other day there's a new person praising Rich Bisaccia, the man, the impact he's had in their life. I think that's probably why this pipeline is as flows as heavy as it has been the last couple of years. Because if guys, you talk about like the old adage of like leaders of men and coaches and like being like that, it just seems like Rich kind of like is that guy. And as much as we detest his overall role in the on the team, I think that goes a long way in building a culture within a locker room. And there is obviously an argument to be made about how much that matters in the context of winning games. Like how much can you really rely on a culture until you just need a change of scenery for a coaching staff to get guy extra out of guys. You know what I mean? Like at some point, the coaching pedigree matters more than the culture, and that's not for us to decide, kind of thing. And so, or fans in general, I should say. But I think that's why, like to your point, they like guys like Nate Hobbs, like Keyshawn Nixon, and the fact that they also played with Bisaccia in Vegas. I don't like you said. I don't think is an accident.
No, no. Um, oh, I was gonna have another point. I have another point, and I'm forgetting.
About Nate Hobbs, about Rich, about culture.
Um, no, here we go. I don't think this precludes the Packers from drafting a corner in the draft.
It shouldn't. It
It
absolutely
shouldn't. I
shouldn't.
don't. I don't
I'd
know
be
if it will
absolutely
be a
upset if it did.
premium pick. We'll get to that. That's probably a later
Yeah,
conversation. But
we'll keep that one holstered.
and then obviously the big domino still dangling is Jair, and at this point, I think it's probably more likely they cut bait with him.
I don't know, man. The longer it doesn't happen, the more I wonder, like, do they just keep him?
I will say you keep your point. I am going to try to find something that will
I don't
add to this
I
discussion.
don't remember seeing anything new, but uh they to lead into a conversation a little bit, like they didn't get anything uh they didn't give anything away for any of the top trade targets as of right now. They still only have 7 picks. They're not getting anything for Jair. Like I'm there's probably like a 2% chance he stays a Packer, but at this point, considering they haven't cut him yet, like I think like do you think they would have cut him by now kind of thing.
So Rob Domofsky posted during the great X outages of 2025. He said at this point, this is timestamped at 12/19, March 10th, 2025. At this point, cornerback Jair Alexander remains a member of the Packers while X was down. A source said Packers GM Brian Gutekunst is not moving him yet. It remains to be seen what happens if they don't trade him and whether that would lead to his outright release. And as we were recording this Monday night, nothing has happened on that front. Um, so we're still in the same situation.
Excuse me. Right. And then in the ESPN story from Jeremy Fowler, it said that the Packers landing Hobbs are expected to move on from cornerback Jair um, via trade or release and aren't likely to bring back cornerback Eric Stokes. But excuse me, I, I I just again he's most likely being cut just for everything we've already touched on throughout this offseason. But given where they're sitting, I would not be surprised if they brought him back. Like surprised and
I would be.
like shocked. I would be surprised that they brought it back from there. I wouldn't be aghast or flabbergasted. I think is like
Uh,
a better thing. I know that everything to this point has made it seem like they're going to. The thing in my brain is that it's been reported that they are trying to move on from him and trying to trade him, etc. But we just haven't heard anything, and maybe that's um a result of the Packers being somewhat tight-lipped when it comes to their negotiations, right? But when it on the same idea of like Cooper Cup was given permission to seek a trade from the Rams very early in the offseason, and with the understanding that they're going to get rid of him. Like that was the idea. The Rams told that they're moving on from him, and they're still trying to find a trade. But there was just reporting today that Cooper Cup is expected to be released this week, pending a deal comes in place for him, like a deal manifests for Cooper Cup. There hasn't been that around Jair. Like you think even his agent would say something like that, or put something out there, or something, or however you want to do it.
or
Like the no news is interesting to me considering all of the news happening around the NFL.
that is, I agree with you with that. I do think it's one of those things where the moment, maybe not the moment, but it could very well be for as much as we were bullish of, there's going to be a team that looks at the cornerback market and be like, yeah, I'll dangle away a sixth round pick for Jair Alexander. There's probably a team lined up right now with an offer on the table that says, this is here waiting for you when, if and when you get released.
I mean,
And
technically, no, that's tampering. Like they cannot have that.
mm,
I mean,
it doesn't,
no,
these
Jordan,
things exist though.
right? I understand that, but like not everything happens like Grady Jarrett today with the Falcons. Like if a team told like Jair's agent this contract is ready for you when it's cut and the Packers found out about it, I'm sure they'd report it. Like
Oh, yeah.
that's tampering
Yeah.
to the fullest.
Yeah. But I think so much has gone out, or like so much is being reported on that to think a reunion, because it would be a reunion with Alexander of the Packers at this point, even though he's still technically a member of the Packers. So much has gotten out about like why things just broke bad
Right.
over his health that like I just don't.
I
I
agree.
really
I listen, I agree. Like to your point, you're not wrong. I'm just saying the no news is very interesting to me in the context of
it
like
is.
Packers cut Jair with a June 1 designation. Packers cut Jair now and will eat the money this year kind of thing. Like I'm just very curious
And so,
what they're waiting for because they're not going to get a pick. I will be flabbergasted and aghast if they get a pick for Jair.
yeah, I think that ship is sailing
And so
right
at
now.
this point it's like why are we waiting? You know? And if it is spite, then shame on the Packers.
Well, do you know what Tom Petty said?
I'm sure it's going to be one of his go ahead.
Waiting is the heart of smart.
Yeah. I'm just again, like this is where I'm what I'm saying is that
Yeah, a lot of
90
movement has happened.
and a lot of cuts have happened.
A lot of cuts has happened. Last year is a perfect example of there was an hour that we thought that the Packers were going to have both Josh Jacobs and Aaron Jones on the same team,
That's
and then
great point.
Aaron Jones was released, and everybody's like, "What?"
Exactly. That is my and that's like that's a different circumstance in which they wanted to keep Aaron Jones because Aaron Jones was still under contract and a valuable player,
But
but
at the same time, I will say, sorry, we didn't know the details of the pay cut situation, but that is way more than they have given Jair Alexander, unless things have changed in
unless
the
things have
last two
changed two
weeks.
weeks ish, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe they did go back to Jair and say, "Do you want to take a deal?" Or like a restructure or something. And so I don't know. I don't know. That's where I sit on this. But to your point earlier, or actually no, not to your point earlier. I was gonna go back to the draft thing. We decided not to decide to wait on that for the draft stuff. But to end up like to wrap on Nate Hobbs, really good player. I think he's going to be utilized in a good way in Jeff Hafley's defense, and I hope that they give him some help out there. Is like where I'll end that because they still need like depth there outside of the three guys they have there now: Keyshawn, Carrington Valentine, and now Nate Hobbs.
I think honestly too, again, not to just use this as the model, but because, he was a former Raider and, whatever. But the model is Keyshawn Nixon. Like the Packers, as much as we've kind of lamented on, wasn't their fault that Jair Alexander didn't work out post extension. Like they they had more sunk costs with that contract than we ever anticipated from the moment he signed that. No one anticipated Eric Stokes being hurt for, by and large, his half of his Packers career. Those are two L's that the Packers have to take, and it's what happens in the NFL. It's why both are likely to move on from the Packers whenever that happens. But when it comes to Carrington Valentine, a seventh round pick, who's your starting corner, and it's not the greatest, but it's also like, yeah, he's fit for the job. Keyshawn Nixon worked his way from being a specialist to being an adequate starting corner outside of his position going into the year. At least, where the season ended up. I think Nate Hobbs is someone similar. Like, he's not a big household name, obviously. He's not a Pro Bowl level corner, all pro, whatever. But it's someone that undervalued. Obviously has, as we mentioned, hasn't had the cleanest bill of health over his, a few seasons in the NFL. But can you mine a diamond out there? And I think Packers have shown with the secondary in those instances of being able to do that. Like even drafting Evan Williams last year, with a day two pick, or not day two pick, it would have been fourth round. But they've kind of made something of those undervalued, kind of lost in the shuffle guys, and whether how we would rank the secondary compared to its NFL counterparts, like they're putting it together better than we even anticipated, especially under Jeff Hafley. Like having Nixon, Valentine opposite each other, and then Bullard in the slot. Like I don't think we ever anticipated that being a successful secondary, but it really found its footing as the season went along and kept them in that Eagles playoff game, even if it was a loss. So I think it's just more of like they have done some good scouting in the past, and I think the hope is it's going to continue here with Nate Hobbs.
Yep. Yep. Totally. Totally agree. Alrighty. Let's get on to the Packers' departures for free agency thus far. It's only one as we're recording. Uh, TJ Slayton signed with the Cincinnati Bengals a 2-year, $15.1 million contract. Still waiting to hear on where Josh Myers will end up. Um, but for TJ Slayton, I'm fine letting him walk kind of thing. But this now puts the pressure on the guys in house, considering that they didn't really land any other defensive line uh, top tier free agent in this class thus far. Missed out on Milton Williams and others to beef up that interior defensive line.
And a lot of money is flying around for D tackles this free agency. It's a good class.
It's a
You
good
know,
class, and it's the quote unquote problem I have with it is the Packers have money to spend. It's like they have cash there to go get guys, and they just haven't. Which guys have to want to come to Green Bay in the first place. So it's not all on Green Bay, but there's been deals out there, and we'll get into that in a minute with some of the receivers. Is where I'm like, relying on the draft and development makes me very nervous going into next year. If that's how we're going, because it kind of looks like that's how we're going, which that that's fine. Jeff Hafley did a good job with the defense last year, but that means you really got to have Devontae Wyatt step up. You really got to have Kenny Clark step up. Carl Brooks and Colby Wooden, and someone has to replace TJ Slayton. Like that, they have to step up. And they fired their D line coach, and so maybe they'll be able to get more out of those guys. But I'm sure they'll adjust it in the draft, but that's still a rookie. And right now, for proven guys on the line, you just have one, and he hasn't been good the last couple of years. And so I'm a little bit uneasy with the D tackle situation right now. Even if I am fine letting TJ Slayton walk because I wouldn't want to pay him this contract solely because we have guys that need
he's
to
a
see if
part.
they're
I mean,
right.
he's so. It's not, I shouldn't say he's so limited because he played a decent amount of snaps, but his
Right.
value is being a run stopper,
Correct.
and
And
you're not built. That's not how you're building your defense.
no. And they need to see what they have in the guys they have. Like they need to see if Devontae Wyatt can play. They need to see if Carl Brooks and Kobe Wooden can play. And so letting him walk for this deal I think is fine. But the state of the defensive line has me a little queasy at the moment is what I'll say.
I agree. I think this is I think if we're looking at the how everything is judged, it's are you keeping up with the Joneses? Are you keeping up with your competitors? And I get. I think the adage of the first day of NFL free agency being, everybody's throwing out funny money. It doesn't actually lead to championships. Like the Eagles just proved that it's not true. The
Yeah,
Packers just proved like
somebody Robert Mays quote
it's
tweeted a
it's
quote from a GM,
yes.
and I retweeted it because I was like, it's just so wrong. He's like, as I don't know who the reporter was that tweeted it, but he said, uh, I just had a conversation with a GM that said this. He's like, my wet blanket today is that you don't win free agency today, but you could definitely lose it. And Robert Mays quote tweeted it, and with the picture of Saquon Barkley and I think it was Zach Bond were like
Yeah.
the two pictures. It's like, yeah, no, you can definitely win championships today. If you just go out and sign talented players that you have a vision for on defense, you can absolutely win championships today
Yeah.
if everything goes perfectly. Like it's
There are difference makers being paid good money today, but that's because they're difference makers. Yeah, I
yeah,
mean, so I get it. Like, I think overall, like this is it's what I expected, but it's also like it is still a very whelming feeling. Like it's
yeah,
not you can't get too high, you can't get too low, but a lot of it just comes down to like, well, they're gonna strike when things slow down. They're maybe they'll get an edge rusher for on a 1 year deal. I think a lot of people were hoping that to be Khalil Mack, and he signed a
yeah.
decent deal with the
Eight,
Chargers to return
18
back
million
there
dollars, I think, was the deal.
for 2 years. Well, provisionally at least.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, it's going back to the drafting and developing. I think the biggest thing is like, as we'll get into the wide receiver talk now, it's like you look at who's being signed in free agency and the deals that they're getting. It's like if you still believe that, as Brian Gutekunst, I think, made very clear, he still believes that wide receiver room is worth someone coming out and being their star wide receiver.
yeah. They're wide
It's
receiver
still
one.
really wide receiver one, yeah, whatever you want to call it. It's hard to see who that is clearly
Mm-hmm.
because of injuries. Because for as much as I really like Jaden Reed's first half of the year, the more we get removed from the year, it's like he really fell off a cliff. Um,
Yeah,
we
drops got
still
drops got the best of them.
Jobs got the best of them. We're gonna wait on Dontavian Wicks to make the leap in year three. How do you address Christian Watson being out for a good chunk of the year?
Mm-hmm.
But that like I always like as much as I want to get suckered into the big names, it's like they're gonna do what they're gonna do. They're
Yep.
gonna draft a wide receiver, and we're gonna be like, he's the guy, and we're gonna do the same cycle of like,
Yeah.
look out.
Well, to that point, like I think like Jaden Higgins out of Iowa State is like a guy to watch for them to possibly draft in the first round, but I doubt that'll happen. But getting back to like the defensive lineman kind of thing, like Puna Ford got a big deal from the Chargers, 3 years, 30 million. Sebastian Joseph re-signed with the Titans. Um, the Bears took a couple of swings on Grady Jarrett and Dio Odangbo. Um, BJ Hill signs, I think re-signs with the Bengals.
Bengals,
Yeah, I
I
believe that
believe so.
was a re-sign, not a new signing. Javon Kinlaw got a deal with the Commanders after they traded for Larry Tunzel. It's just like there were guys there that they could have signed, and maybe they don't want to give a big deal to kind of thing, but they need to address it somehow, and they either need to address it with a guy that's going to surefire play right away, or they need to just have those guys develop that they have in the locker room now develop into plus players. They can't just be average right now.
Yes.
Like they just need to be plus players at this point. So, um, yeah, that's TJ Slayton leaving. Um, anything else that way, or should we get into the receiver talk, Jordan?
Uh, Nothing official yet. Josh Myers has not been signed yet, but
Yeah,
it was already reported by Bill Huber before the bank signing that Josh Myers was likely not to return to Green Bay. So we bid farewell, and we'll see where he signs because kind of thought that he would have been the first domino to fall, honestly, whether that was returning or signing elsewhere.
yeah. I'm not too surprised at the moment, but um, who was the other center? The Bears signed him. Drew Dahlman. He signed with the Bears.
Yes.
So he was like the first center to come off the free agent board. So alrighty, let's get into a bit of the misses the Packers have had this offseason thus far because I'm not annoyed or frustrated or downtrodden or calling for Goody's head in any shape or form when I'm talking about this. I just think that with the money that they have and the draft assets that they have, I'm a bit concerned at just the way they went about it, right? So we'll start with the biggest names. Well, there's only three names to really talk about. Uh, the 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 Seahawks trade DK Metcalf uh, to the Pittsburgh Steelers for a second round pick, and the Steelers end up extending DK Metcalf on a 5 year, $150 million deal. For what it's worth, I think Spotrac has it being a 4 year extension, but just reworking his current year with on his last deal of his rookie extension. I don't know the specifics. The number reported is 5 years, 150 million. And so part of that is like people thought that the Packers would be in on this, right? I think I saw it today and I might be misled, but that someone reported that the Packers never made an offer on DK to for him to
That has been reported, not from just Matt Schneidman, but also Jason Wilde.
right. So
Um,
first and foremost, that's a that I don't know why. Like he's a young receiver, young quote unquote. He's 27. He's young for he's not 30 in his 30s kind of thing. He's a receiver you could have got for a second round pick. And sure, they didn't uh they didn't make an offer, but at some point someone was like maybe the Packers did uh maybe they did offer him and they just didn't want it. Maybe the Steelers also offer a second. The Steelers have pick 55, the Packers have pick 54. Like sometimes it's just the better pick, and that's what you're going up against. The fact that they didn't like even make an offer is I just don't know. You can't stand tall and say that you need playmakers. It's time to compete for championships now and not go get a player like DK Metcalf. Like, yeah, I know you really don't want to pay DK Metcalf 30 million a year to be a receiver, but like a top receiver. But at the same time, he is a top receiver. Looking at the receiver market for like top value of their contracts, right now it's Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, and now DK's new deal. But then after that, it's Amon-Ra St. Brown, Brandon Ayuk, DJ Moore. Like you don't get like once you get to Amari Cooper, who's finishing out his deal with the Bills this year, like he's now a free agent. He was at 5 years, 100 million. I mean, like AJ Brown is his extension is pretty big. He's at like 96 million. I don't know. I just think that like with Jamar Chase's new deal, he's gonna have a massive one. T Higgins is probably gonna be north of 100 million. I think that's just the price of a top receiver, and you need that with this offense. Like I think in we saw that plenty last year. There wasn't a guy, and if Goody thinks that they have the guy there, he's entitled to that belief. I'm still just hesitant as they have a number one guy there because there's flaws in all of them, and obviously very few guys have no flaws, and if they are, it's Jamar Chase, it's Justin Jefferson, it's the top receivers in the NFL. But like with no Christian Watson, it makes that room so much more. There's so much more not confusion, but like it's up in the air as to how effective they can be without a guy that can stretch the field. And maybe they do go get MVS and they have a reunion there. To me, that's it's Christian Watson light. Doesn't do a lot of the in the backfield stuff, but a guy that is known for his speed that had issues with drops on big plays. And
yeah,
I'm sorry to Christian Watson, I'm sorry to MVS, but it feels like the same player and that might just be okay. But I know some people don't like to give that money to DK Metcalf, but I mean, golly, he's 27.
the Steelers did that without having a quarterback
Yeah, like they believe
because
that
that's what he's
that
worth.
is what he's worth. Like that he
Yeah, I
can.
mean, like we can quibble where if we talk about like the receivers making 30 million, AAV last pod.
Yep,
And it's like that is the
it's
elite
it's the
class.
elite guys.
And if DK Metcalf, whether you think that he's maybe on the downturn, maybe injuries will start to creep in. as he gets older. For 5 years, if you think that he's going to give you good football, similar stats to what he posted probably before this year because it was a down year for at least 3 years of that contract, then that's a win.
That's
That's the
worth
whole
it.
point.
I
You know
think
what I mean?
I think the biggest thing is that like you think of the eras of quarterbacks that the Packers have had, right? Like between Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers. And early on in Brett Favre's career, he had guys to throw to. Like Sterling Sharp was there for a year. Then you get into the I'm gonna say the rest of those guys because
I
Jordan,
got it. Yeah.
tell me who the receivers were in the early '90s.
Antonio Freeman, Robert
That was early
Brooks.
2000s, but yeah, Robert Brooks.
No, that Super Bowl year was Antonio
I
Freeman.
don't know if he was on that team. I had
Antonio Freeman played for a while, but
not a
like
clue. Anyways,
I
but
think Rondé Rison was a
yep,
like
Andre Rison.
unsung hero in that Super Bowl year.
And so he had them. And in the 2000s, he had Javon Walker. And then in the latter part of his career, before he left, he had Jordy Nelson and Greg Jennings. And then as Rodgers started his career, he had Jordy Nelson and Greg Jennings. He gets Randall Cobb and James Jones and these guys that are talented football players, right?
And
And
Davante.
and he later in his career gets Davante. Right now, Jordan Love's best receiver just might be Tucker Craft. Like
I
that's not like meant to be dismissive of the guys that are there now in the receiver room. Like Jaden Reed's a good player. Like I think he has potential. Dontavian Wicks has uber amounts of potential. He's oozing with potential, Jordan. We just haven't seen it. And like Christian Watson was that guy, but he's been snake bitten. Romeo Dobbs is a talented player. I think he's a bit one faceted. He's a bit one dimensional, right? And so I just worry about surrounding Jordan Love with enough pass catcher talent to make his career matter. Not matter, but you like to make it the best that it can be. Because you look at the guys that Favre and Rodgers had. They had distinguished number one guys for the majority of their careers in Green Bay. Right now, going into
across different eras of
eras,
their career.
right? Going into year 3 of Jordan Love in his what is his first era, he doesn't have a standout receiver. And I
It's the wide receiver by committee.
right, and we thought that'd be good last year. I was the one handing out Kool-Aid that it's going to be the next Sports Illustrated cover with all the guys there. It hasn't turned out that way. And that's when Jordan or Josh Jacobs said they need a number one receiver. He's right. And
Yeah.
so to balk on this this deal with DK to not even offer anything, I think is a not a misstep, but I think it's a I don't want to say delusional. I think that's a bit harsh. It's just not what I would have done.
I think it's just unnecessary.
Yeah,
It's unnecessary to even put that out there
to
when
right. That's a great way to put it.
because if you were willing to put out an offer like the one that we talked about with Corbin or based on Corbin K. Smith's reporting, the third round pick with Romeo Dobbs or whatever current Packers wide receiver that's healthy that they trade, and the Steelers outbid them.
That's fine. If you
They've
get
done
all,
that has happened with lesser receivers
yep,
in Brady Gutekunst's tenure. Chase Claypool being the biggest example,
yep,
and they dodged a bullet.
dodged a bullet.
So why put it out there that they didn't even make an offer?
Yeah,
I mean, whether I believe that or not, I honestly do not
yeah,
because I just think the kind of cleanup on doing that just seems really dumb.
yep.
I think the our overall point, and it's the biggest thing that will honestly judge how much Jordan Love continues to improve, frankly, is so they've stuck to this wide receiver by committee. The first half of Jordan Love's 2023 season, so not this year, but the year before, they were not good. They played like crap. The team was bad. They made their push. It was even the guys that we anticipated, like Christian Watson. It was like Bo Melton, Romeo Dobbs, Jaden Reed, really putting everything together. Dontavian Wicks is
Yep.
kind of in the mix
They all
there.
made big leaps in the second half of that season.
Yeah. And then when they beat the Cowboys in the surprise playoff victory, Romeo Dobbs had his best game as a professional. And it's always been kind of, since then, it's this yard mark of like, this guy is a good player, but we
Mm-hmm.
don't see it consistently.
Right.
And I think, as we saw this year, of like riding high first half of the year, even with Jordan Love missing some games and Malik Willis playing, guys still made impacts. They, even if they weren't stuffing up like or getting chunk plays, they were getting in the end zone, like Jaden Reed or whatever. But it's never been consistently. It's never sustained itself over the course of a 17 game season. It's been halves of seasons. It's been intermittent games. It's been every other game, or it's been this. It's like eventually you think that will level out where it starts to hit that kind of square wave, whatever you want to call it, of like this is the impact that you're going to get from your wide receiver group.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand being bullish on your own guys. That is just kind of the Packer way, but I just don't see this wide receiver group being that good enough. And I get it. There are lesser wide receivers that got paid today that are making as much money as, or more so than the Packers have on their roster with their wide receivers. That we would be like, why are you overpaying him? It's a fickle game. We don't know all the information available to GMs through parsing out who's interested in who. But if the name of the game is to get better, to play for championships, and to ultimately lift your quarterback, you're gonna do it through the drafts. I understand that, but like I just don't I don't see why the risk wasn't gonna be one to not take when you're not guaranteed to get it or sorry, you're not guaranteed to see a DK Metcalf like player hit the trade market every year. Especially when you got to pay, like
Yep.
as we said last pod, like this is just going to be the standard that they have set for themselves,
Mm-hmm.
and they only stand to lose if nothing changes. If they do, you know, a small move on the side and hope it brings everything together. But a lot is riding on the likes of Jaden Reed, Romeo Dobbs, Dontavian Wicks, and for right now, I'm not gonna even gonna pencil in that they're drafting someone
Yep.
just to get disappointed from that. But like, I think your point about Tucker Kraft being their best wide receiver or best receiver right now is
Yeah.
spot on because I just don't see
Which
how anyone else compares.
right, in which to their point, like if this leads to Tucker Craft becoming a more focal part of the offense, that's a good thing. I just we don't know what they're going to do yet, and I think part of it too is like they it seems like they're going to be a run heavy team, which I'm happy they have a running back, and I'm happy they have Josh Jacobs, and he's a good player. It just makes me wonder if like they just think they have enough in Jordan Love that he can lift the tides of the receiving room, and the rest will fall on Josh Jacobs' shoulders for offensive production kind of thing. But I do wonder kind of thing. I just wonder what could have been if they had Jordan Love, DK, and Josh Jacobs. Like that sounds and again, Josh Jacobs is a free agent. I think after this year, if I'm not mistaken, I think his original deal was a 2 year deal. I'm gonna find that right now because I'm pretty sure
I
it
I
wasn't a
want to say it
long
was
deal.
4 years, 48 million.
Maybe, but that's also just what Nate Hobbs just signed. You nailed it spot on. I don't know why I thought it was only a 2 year deal. Oh, you want to know why he had an out after this year? That's why.
Yes,
That's why I thought it was earlier than it was. So, but
which I'm going to say that
no,
he will not.
it already passed. It already passed.
Yeah.
So that's that for DK. But the same idea applies to Davante. Packers miss out on Davante. He signs with the Rams on a 2 year, I think $46 million deal, something like that. Goes to Southern California, goes back to the West Coast, plays for a contender to replace Cooper Cup. We don't know if they made it an offer on Davante. I think I saw a report today that they didn't make an offer to him, but
Which actually seems more
which
plausible.
seems more plausible. But I still would have liked them to take a swing on Davante for the same thing that we just talked about. So just take all of that and apply it to Davante as well, with the caveat they wouldn't have had to give anything up to get him. They just had to pay him what he wanted to get paid, and they had cap to do it. And so take that as you might. That's just the same thing applies to what we had just talked about, to DK to Davante, but with the caveat that they wouldn't have had to give up picks to get him. They could have just signed him. And maybe Davante didn't want to come back. Like maybe Davante had enough of Green Bay, wanted to be out West Coast where he initially wanted to be after his Green Bay tenure. Maybe he just didn't want to come back. But I wish they would have. Wish he would be kind of thing. I like Davante. He's a good player. They need a guy that can catch the ball and be good, and he is that guy. So, do you have any words on Davante?
No, I kind of, I mean, it's a good sign for the Rams,
It is.
especially after not all the weirdness with Matt Stafford.
Yeah, I think it's a
Um,
really good signing. It fits their timeline like perfectly for what they're trying to do in the next 2 years.
and good for Devontae. I think honestly for him, I think he just needed a new original idea rather than like I'm gonna play with my college quarterback. I'm gonna play with Aaron
Yeah,
Rodgers. It's like no,
I see what you're saying.
do something new.
Yeah,
Just do something new.
I see what you're saying. Um, Last thing to touch on before we get out of here. Not that it's small, but it's enough to talk about. Um, Miles Garrett signs a new freaking mega extension with the Browns, proving once again that money is more important than winning in some players' eyes. I had that initial thought when Eric Decker signed with the Jets after his tenure with the Broncos. Uh, that was like that was like one like my like
What?
my first time where I was like, man, Eric Decker's a really good player. And then he went and signed that big deal with the Jets. I was like, proving that money matters more than winning to some players. And after all of
That's
the
so funny that you compared. I
not
understand. I
compared,
totally
it's just that
I know,
like
but like the thought association of like yeah.
the thought association is that money is more important than winning sometimes. And the first time I had that thought and like realized that was Eric Decker. Um, which is yeah,
Start a reality
which
show.
you're not wrong. That is very funny. But after all of the big talk that he had, that he's done with Cleveland, that he wants to get traded, he wants to go somewhere with a winning culture, wants to go somewhere warm, the whole kit and caboodle, right? He just resigns with the Cleveland Browns, and like good for Cleveland, good for Miles Garrett for getting a massive contract with generational wealth. I'm it sounds like I'm annoyed. I'm not. I'm just annoyed at the process of it all. That he made it seem. He put out a statement, like the whole thing, right? Like he went on this whole idea that he wasn't playing anymore. Made it seem like he was going to
And
sit out, and then just
not even just that. I think honestly, like as much as society and I feel like the culture around covering athletes has become more pro player
mhm,
than the 80s, the 90s, even the 2000s.
right.
Probably the most reasonable trade request that anybody has ever
Anybody he's ever had,
like universally accepted like, yeah, you should leave.
right? But to everybody outside of Cleveland, like I'm in a Cleveland
Even
Discord.
in
Well, some of them, some people in. I was in a Cleveland Discord, and they were like, you just can't trade Miles Garrett." I'm like, what do you mean you can't trade him? You guys haven't been good. You have one playoff win under him, and you guys are spinning your tires. Jimmy Haslam wouldn't take a meeting. Would not take a meeting with Miles Garrett about being traded. And to his credit, it worked. They signed him to an extension. But it's just like I don't understand all of the grandstanding from his camp that he wasn't going to play, only to sign the extension, right? Like to Miles Garrett's credit, and again, I'm happy for Cleveland because like Miles Garrett is a type of player that should be with the team his entire career. He's an all-time player, a first ballot Hall of Famer. He will have his number retired in Cleveland. This is it's a good thing. It's very much like the Giannis thing. Like you never want to take
Joe Thomas went to the Hall of Fame and he
exactly.
never
Never played in
played
the
a
playoff.
playoff game.
Nope. Exactly. And the same idea that like some of these guys just are lifers. You don't want to take lifers away from their team just because they're bad, right? But if the guy requests a trade and he wants out, to not respect that in the first part from the franchise is a bit, I don't want to say annoying, but it's just like come on. Like if he wanted out, you should let him go where he wanted to go. And ultimately they get a deal done so he stays in Cleveland and is a part of that community still. It's just like the process of it all is crazy to me. Along with, we're getting into like the Primo idea now because I was going to touch on this in the Primo episode tomorrow. But like the Browns suck. They are going nowhere.
He was waiting for Kenny Pickett to come.
Yeah, they got a Super Bowl winning quarterback at quarterback, and it's just like I'll touch more of this in the Primo episode and everything. So I guess I'll tease that. But from a Packers perspective, I wish they could have got him because like now they're looking at paying Trey Hendrickson, and I talked about that last week, and it's like, ugh, it makes my
I
stomach
think
uneasy to the idea of trading for Trey Hendrickson to then pay him a deal because he's gonna want big money, and he's older than Max Crosby, who got his deal, and Myles Garrett, who got his deal now.
unless it has already been written and the start of free agency kind of overshadowed it because it really was just like a whiplash effect of like, oh, Myles Garrett is staying in Cleveland to signings are happening. We're in the churn of free agency moves. I think I will hold my opinion on anything Myles Garrett related because if we had such an about face from him basically going around the league at Super Bowl week just saying like I want to be traded. I want to leave Cleveland for competitive reasons. I want to play for Super Bowls.
Right,
To 6 weeks later being having it all resolved by him being paid, the highest contract for a
quarterback
non-quarterback.
ever.
Something, like maybe he
Someone's
wasn't.
lying.
I don't know if someone's lying, but someone is or which side some side is not revealing that they were going to stay here if it meant this.
Right,
I don't know,
right.
but
Yeah. So and the
just a strange outcome all around.
yeah, and the twist of the knife for me was that both of those deals happened like Sunday or Saturday.
Yes,
So like
it was
The
Sunday.
DK Metcalf and the Myles Garrett deal both happened within like an hour of each other. I was like, fuck. I did best not swear the entire episode. I dropped one there. It's just like, ugh, come on, man. Like they two guys I really wish the Packers would have like won it. They would have gotten one of them kind of thing. But it's just frustrating. It's like it's $40 million a year to just be one of the best players in the NFL's ever seen on a team that's not going to win games.
And it will not matter.
Like it might matter in like I don't know, man, 3 years when he's 33. Like he's his age 30 season this year. I just don't see them competing at all in the next 3 years. Like 2028 earliest at the best, unless they somehow nail a quarterback, which I just don't know what they do. I don't know. So what we'll get more into that in the primo. Go check it out. It's $8 a month for free GSPN ads or pods, no ad. Holy moly, ad free GSPN pods. Written articles from Jordan. Jordan just wrote one the other yesterday on the free agency primer for the Packers. So check that out. Uh, Regardless, that's where I'm at. I'm just the edge room in Green Bay is still a concern, and I, I just don't know where you go right now with that. Like, I don't think trading for Trey Hendrickson is the best use of assets. If you're not going to trade for DK, you're not going to. Maybe they did make a run at Myles Garrett. We don't know. But if you're not going to trade for DK, I don't know why you trade for Trey Hendrickson. It's the same idea, and he's older. It's the same idea. Like I just don't think they're going to do that. I'd be surprised given the reporting that they didn't make an offer for DK because I bet they have to pay something similar to Trey Hendrickson. So I would bet it's around like 3 years, 100 million if I were to guess for Trey Hendrickson. That's what he wants, as what I imagine. Because if he's not sniffing Myles Garrett money, and I think Michael Parsons
No.
wants something in like the 35 range, and he's
Yeah.
not. He's probably wants something closer to that, and who knows? So
We'll see.
we'll see.
Lifetime supply of creatine powder.
Anything else, Jordan, or should we wrap up here?
No, I think I ended well on that note. That was a
Lovely,
good one. I
lovely.
feel good.
So, all right, folks. Thank you for listening. We'll be back. We'll be back. I guess when more news happens next week, almost certainly. But if there's big news for the Packers this week, maybe they do make a bigger move and stuff's on the horizon. We'll be back on the pod then. But
Maybe it's Trey for Trey Hendrickson.
yeah,
I'm joking.
I know.
Maybe not.
I know.
I don't know.
Regardless, we'll be back in your podcast feeds either next week or when big news drops for Packers. So thank you for subscribing and checking us out. Uh, Go check out GSP or GSPN Eurostep for all things Bucks. Ty Rohan just dropped a new episode today on Eurostep, just talking about uh, the Bucks dropping back-to-back games to the Magic and the Cavaliers as they try and figure out their offense still on against good defenses. The Brewers are in spring training and warming up for their seasons. Go check out Cruising for a Bruising with Adam and Andrew, and all the other GSPN pods are all there for you to check out as well. Jordan swinging the bat in the whole 9 yards. So, all right, that does it for us, folks. Thank you again for listening, and Jordan, thank you.
Thank you.